I don't know why antitrust all of a sudden is a big topic in the news, but you know what? I'm all for it. It's nice that antitrust is actually becoming a thing that is actually being pursued against big companies. But today we're not talking about the Amazons, Microsofts, Googles of the world. Today we're talking about a company that I'm personally quite a big fan of. Just to make it clear that I am quite biased in this situation. That being Valve, the company that has made the world of Linux gaming maybe not possible per se, but definitely a lot more convenient than it was before, and they've put a lot of resources into making it, good like it is today. Plus, we get fun devices like the Steam Deck as well. We get devices like the Steam Controller, the Steam Controller 2, which is probably maybe gonna be a thing. There's been leaks that have been discovered about it, which is all gonna have great Linux support on Linux. Valve is, a really respected company. Just, again, making my bias very clear. Now, whilst I might be a fan of Valve, and I know a lot of other people in the PC gaming space are as well, for the whole sales and all that other stuff, that doesn't mean that everything is perfect. Valve effectively has a monopoly on the PC gaming market. Whilst other marketplaces do exist, there are your GOGs, your Epic Games Store, your Ubisoft Store. I don't even care what it's called because I don't think Ubisoft cares anymore, bringing a lot of their games back to Steam. I don't know if that one will be around that much longer. And when you buy a game on Steam, it is tied to your Steam account, so a lot of players don't really like having to go to other markets and have multiple launchers installed, and, Valve has built a system where it's very convenient to only be a customer of Valve. Now, if you've been following the PC gaming market for a couple of years now, an antitrust lawsuit against Valve might sound somewhat familiar, but not familiar recently, familiar a couple of years back. And that's because this is not the first attempt this team has made at filing antitrust against Valve. Back in 2021, Wolfire Games filed an antitrust lawsuit against Valve, as was covered by Gaming on Linux and various other outlets, Kotaku, IGN. I think it got some general tech coverage as well, just because of how big Valve is as a company. It claimed that Valve uses Steam's position as the undisputed market leader to take a excessively large cut of sales. At the time, Valve was taking a 30% cut of all item sales up to 10 million, after which point the cut falls to 25% for sales up to 50 million, and then 20% for sales above that figure. They argue by doing this, it keeps the prices of games artificially higher than they need to be. They claim that Steam could be operated with a considerably lower commission from the Steam side. So something more like 85% goes to the developer, 15% goes to Steam. The suit also mentions clauses that Valve have that prevent developers selling at cheaper prices on other stores. Valve blocks pro-competitive price competition through two main provisions, the Steam key price parity provision and the price veto provision, which many have disputed as being a real issue, instead claiming that Valve only takes issue if developers are generating Steam keys, which they have the ability to generate as many as they want, and then selling them on another platform. So if you take a key and then sell that directly, Valve doesn't get a cut. If you sell the key through the Steam platform, then they do. But if you wanted to go and list on GOG or the Epic Games Store or any other store and then list at a lower price, most people are saying that Valve doesn't have an issue with that. In that case, no Steam keys are being distributed. You are distributing keys for those various different platforms. Now, Wolfire at the time disagreed, as this was the main crux of their argument, writing in the blog post regarding the Valve class action. I did not set out with the goal of suing Valve, but I've personally experienced the conduct described in the complaint. When new video game stores were opening that charged much lower commissions than Valve, I decided that I would provide my game Overgrowth at a lower price to take advantage of the lower commission rates. I intended to write a blog post about the results. But when I asked Valve about this plan, they replied that they would remove Overgrowth from Steam if I allowed it to be sold at a lower price anywhere. even from my own website, without Steam keys and without Steam's DRM. This would make it impossible for me or any game developer to determine whether or not Steam is earning their commission. I believe that other developers who charge lower prices on other stores have been contacted by Valve, telling them their games will be removed from Steam if they did not raise their prices on competing stores. The entire crux of the lawsuit hinged on this statement, on the fact that firstly, he got this email. Secondly, he interpreted the email correctly. And thirdly, other people also received similar emails and were also asked not to price at a lower price than other stores. Now, I can't speak for every single game developer out there, but considering that a lot of game developers who do list on multiple stores came to the defense of Valve saying that no, this is not the case, this only relates to selling Steam keys at a cheaper price, I find it kind of hard to believe that this is actually true. Is it possible that they got an email and maybe misinterpreted it? Yes. Is it possible they got the email and it actually said the thing that they are saying here? Yes, but is that actually the policy that Steam tries to enforce? I haven't found any evidence of that being the case, but I'm willing to be wrong. Now, for anyone who is not terminally online who may not know who Wolfire is, they're a small US-based indie game studio who have made a couple of interesting games, notably Overgrowth, the more recent one, and Lugaru. I have played this one on Steam. This is available under the GPL license. It is about Kung Fu rabbits. Yes. And Overgrowth is a spiritual successor. This one has a lot of very mixed opinions about it. There are a lot of people who played it early on who say it is absolutely garbage. There are people playing it now that say it's better, and there's a good modding scene around it, so yeah. Also, they have Receiver, which I've never played before. But Lugaru. Highly recommend this one. Also, random other fact that nobody ever brings up. The Humble Bundle was started out of Wolfire Games. The very first Humble Bundle was run under Wolfire, before then being spun off as its own separate company. Now, whilst the game pricing issue may not be brought up by many other people, when it comes to the Valve commission, this one has been brought up many, many times before. Back in 2019, 2 years before the lawsuit, former Paradox Interactive CEO calls the 70-30 revenue split outrageous and praises Epic. This is also one of the foundational reasons for why Epic Games Store was actually created, and early on, like before its creation, Tim Sweeney was bouncing around an 8% commission, which would have been insane. Upon launch of the Epic Games Store, though, it was set to 12%. In 2019... he did pull a little bit back from that, saying Epic adds a payment processing fee to the high overhead international payment methods marked with asterisk in the hyperlink chart above because it's the only practical way to operate a 12% fee store in those developing countries. Why Valve takes 30% everywhere, I do not know. So they have additional fees on top of the 12% to deal with payment processing, which is included in the Valve 30%, to my understanding. A few years later, Tim Sweeney has again said some different things. After laying off 830 people in 2023, the Epic Games Store is now financially sound, so making a bunch of cuts to just basically make it as lightweight as possible. Apparently, the 12% is now viable. But for many years before that, they were losing money on the Epic Games Store. So, whilst it might be viable, the 30% gives you a lot more of a comfortable buffer. Now, following the lawsuit being filed in 2021, Valve also moved to get it dismissed within the same year. In the no motion filed on July 26th, Valve were quite blunt with their reasoning for wanting it all thrown out. The point about Steam keys is an interesting one, As the motion states, plaintiffs' allegations that Valve's Steam key rule amounts to an unlawful PMFN, that is a permanent most favored nation, fail for the most straightforward reason that Valve, which created and owns Steam, has no duty under the antitrust laws to create a method, here Steam keys, for game developers to sell Steam-enabled games in stores that compete with Steam. Basically, Valve's rebuttal here is, we don't need to make it possible for you to be able to sell Steam keys on other stores. Along with this saying, what's missing from the plaintiff's narrative about the 16 games priced the same way is any factual allegation that Valve enforced the alleged PMFN or did anything at all to affect, let alone coerce, the developers to sell at the same prices in two stores. Also saying, yes, there are games that are priced the same way on Steam and another platform, but you haven't shown any evidence that they're doing that because of Steam. They could just be doing it because they want to do it like that. And the courts at the time agreed, and the case got dismissed. But they did have 30 days to resubmit a new case, and a new case is what they did. However, not by themselves. They decided to combine it with a separate antitrust case launched by Dark Cat Studios, a fairly small VR media company whose case had already been partially dismissed, so it was already on, fairly shaky ground anyway, but having Wolfire's case also dismissed, it seemed like a perfect pairing to try and get something done. But that was all 3 years ago. Why am I bringing it up now? Well, that new combined case hasn't been dismissed, and it's been slowly getting worked on over these past couple of years. Here we have an article from gamesindustry.biz, and according to recent court documents, their motion for class certification was granted by United States District Judge Jamal N. Whitehead, transforming the antitrust lawsuit from being two developers versus the company to now being a class action lawsuit applying to any developer, publisher, or individual who has paid the 30% commission to Steam on or after January 28th, 2017. In the same order, the judge denied Valve's request to exclude the testimony of an expert, Dr. Steven Schwartz, whom the two studios called to argue their case. Both Wolfire Studios and Dark Cat will be the class representatives for the action. At this point, we don't know how this case is going to go, but after being dismissed once, this lawsuit has come back with a vengeance. And if this actually does pass, Valve's out for a lot of money. Not just to these two developers, but to every single developer, publisher, and individual on the platform who has sold a game. For the past 7 years, right? I cannot express how big of a deal this would be if this actually does pass. And it seems like in this case, the judge is not immediately hostile to the case, not immediately throwing it out. That doesn't mean it is going to pass. That's still a while down the line. But so far, it has not been dismissed. So if you thought back in 2021, we were done with this case, that Wolfire would just have to go about their day, that this antitrust case just was nothing. Look, it might still be nothing, but if I was Valve, I would be making sure that everything's in line, making sure my legal team is very, very well paid, because if they lost this, they don't want to lose this. I don't think Valve's gonna go anywhere because of it, but I would not want to pay out the kind of money they would have to pay out if they lose this. As someone who really cares about Linux gaming and the work that Valve does with it, I will certainly be keeping a very close eye on this. I hope it goes well, but we'll see. We'll see. But what do you think? Do you think Valve is a horrible, terrible company? Or do you think that this is fine? Do you think this lawsuit actually makes sense? I would love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribes, LiberaPay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and again, I am a very biased source here, so do your own reading.